As a cynic, you could say the new Asus Zenbook S16 is basically just a minor refresh with AMD's new Ryzen 400 silicon that basically has not really a right to exist, since when it comes to performance at least, you do not get a whole lot more than what we saw when we first tested the Strix Point version of this beauty more than 1.5 years ago. But then again, a laptop and therefore your individual user experience is so much more than just Cinebench and 3D Mark scores, and this is where the 2026 S16 really shines. And if you're not a gamer, creator or any other sort of power user, but want a premium laptop for pretty much everything you do with a laptop on a daily basis, well, we do not use the P word lightly around here at Notebook Check, but damn, this puppy is very, very close to perfection. Let's get into it. Our sample of the gorgeous 16-incher is again the first laptop in the studio to bet on AMD's new Ryzen AI 9465, which is basically the same as the 365 with only minor differences. And if you expect a similar bump in performance as we have seen with Intel and Panther Lake this year, well, you might be disappointed, be it on the CPU side and even more so on the GPU side, but more on that later. Thankfully, Asus did not skimp when it comes to memory and the SSD, and for this kind of machine, 32 gigs and a 1TB drive should be plenty, even for the years to come. And as per usual, for this class of devices, you can swap the NVMe SSD for a higher capacity version as soon as the current craziness is over, while the RAM is soldered. One of the major updates for this one is the new OLED though, and while the technical specs are quite similar, so we are still talking about a roughly 3K display with a 120Hz refresh rate, especially brightness got a massive boost, especially in HDR, almost doubling what we have been able to measure with the Zenbook's predecessor. SDR got a more modest but still very welcome bump as well, so if you're into watching movies or shows with this one, well, you should not be disappointed. As per usual, you get the inky blacks we are used to see from OLEDs by now, and in typical Asus fashion, we get factory calibration on reference level, almost 100% coverage for sRGB, Adobe RGB and Display P3 and additional presets. So if you want to use the Zenbook for initial color grading or as a production machine on a photo set for example, you can definitely do so. The glossy panel is also a touchscreen, and in addition to pretty much instantaneous response times, Asus also doubled the PWM frequency to hopefully bother you a bit less should you be sensitive towards flickering displays. From the first highlight to the next, and that's definitely the chassis for the S16, and I still picked this one up and can simply not believe how thin it is. And this being a 16-incher, structural rigidity is exceptional. Especially with larger laptops being this thin, if you pick them up with just one hand, things can be a bit bendy and wobbly. But not with this one, and the aluminum base and Ceraluminum display lid keep everything in place without even the tiniest bit of flex. I just have to be honest, I'm a bit torn about the new design on the lid, and I definitely prefer the predecessor here, but if you like a bit more of a subtle looking laptop, then this will be your thing. As per usual, we still get the tiny design tidbits all around the chassis that make sure you know you are dealing with a premium device here, starting with the lasered grille above the keyboard, the trackpad aligning with the subtle edge on the keyboard deck, and the clean overall branding. Overall weight is in that perfect sweet spot that make the S16 feel premium without being too heavy to easily move it around or weigh down your backpack too much if you commute with this beauty. And again, there's hardly anything to complain about here, and even the hinges hold the display in place without too much excess wobble. Our Wi-Fi measurements also returned excellent numbers, which is great for a device that will most likely have something to do with the internet for pretty much everything you are doing. But unfortunately, the webcam cannot quite keep up, and for such a premium device, and especially considering how much time we all spend in calls in this day and age, I really hope we will see some more profound improvements in this regard soon. But back to the good things, and I have always been a fan of Asus's keyboards, and the S16 is no exception. And despite the relatively low travel, you still get great tactility, and the layout I got used to pretty quickly, even though that will be highly subjective of course. Unfortunately, the trackpad isn't haptic, which is a bit of a missed opportunity, but that said, it works and feels great, so in the end it isn't really a problem if you ask me. In typical Asus fashion, it comes with additional functionality along the edges to control brightness and volume for example, so that's cool if you're not into keyboard shortcuts. So that leaves us with performance, and as I've mentioned before, it's not quite terrible, but also not great. So let's get this over with. Asus tweaked the overall power profile slightly, and the new CPU can now be fed with up to 45 watts for short burst loads or 35 watts sustained in the Zenbook's performance mode, which we used for our testing. But to be honest, it might be best to avoid that one for most of the time, but more about that later when we talk about fan noise. Similar to its predecessor, the Ryzen 9 4665 is a 10-core CPU with the biggest changes to the silicon being the support for faster RAM across the board and a faster NPU, if you are able to find something to use it for. In our CPU rating, the new chip performs pretty well though, and while the overall improvement over the direct predecessor is pretty substantial thanks to higher clocks and the before mentioned higher power levels, Intel is quite a bit ahead across all of our tests, and the 465 is about on par with the HX 370, which is actually not that bad considering we are talking 10 versus 12 cores. And while we will talk a bit more in depth about value later, and it's a bit too early to tell in general, but it seems like laptops with the Intel X7 or X9 might end up being significantly more expensive than the Zenbook. So that might also influence your perspective on our numbers here somewhat. Looking at isolated Cinebench 24 numbers, and we are getting somewhat competitive multi-core results, even though once again Intel and Apple are quite a bit ahead, while single-core results are lacking quite a bit, especially against what the M5 is able to pull off here. System performance is quite decent, and even just using this one, again, if you do not expect the Zenbook to be a workstation, creative powerhouse or a gaming laptop, you got more than enough headroom for pretty much everything else you could come up with. Speaking of gaming or GPU performance in general, well, it's the same 880M we already know from the last gen CPUs, and once more, it's faster than the 890M in the 2024 Zenbook S16 thanks to the higher power limits and faster RAM. And compared to Intel's last gen Lunar Lake or Arrow Lake GPUs, you are still getting competitive numbers, and that will probably remain true for Intel's current gen non-XQs, but it's not really a competition against the Arc B390, as you can see in our synthetics. When looking at actual FPS numbers, it's pretty much the same story, with slightly higher results against Ryzen 300, competitive numbers when comparing to Lunar Lake, and far less than what you could expect from Panther Lake or the Apple M5 for that matter, as long as you can find games to run natively. I briefly touched upon the power profiles for the S16, and again, you should definitely not use the performance mode, since the S16 will put a few gaming laptops to shame when it comes to fan noise without a considerable performance benefit. But as per usual, hear for yourself, and I also included some speaker samples against our new reference, which is the Yoga Pro 9. And while the Lenovo is still king, what Asus is getting out of the thin chassis is really not bad, and you can definitely enjoy some music or movies with the S16 without a problem. Considering the overall architecture of the Ryzen 400 silicon is again the same as what we have seen before, we can also not really expect significantly longer runtimes, since efficiency will be about on par with Ryzen 300. And if you want to dive deeper into that particular topic, well, you are in luck, since we have a dedicated article for you about that on the website. For the S16, that means runtimes are a bit better, but that's probably more because of the increased battery capacity than from any advancements in the CPU itself. That said, 13 hours in our Wi-Fi test isn't really bad, and about 8 hours with maximum brightness will also get you through even the longest movies with quite some time to spare. Just do not expect any record-breaking numbers here. Alright, so how about we wrap it up? Yes, the S16's internals do not leave a lot to sing praise about. That said, unless you specifically want more GPU performance and are ready to pay the premium for it, either with Intel's high-end X-series Panther Lake SoCs or Apple's latest M5s, the Zenbook is still a very capable computing machine. And I think Asus did an overall great job of tuning the premium looking and feeling 16-incher to what the majority of people will want to use it for. So you get a gorgeous OLED with high HDR brightness, a comfortable keyboard, a very well made and sexy looking chassis, and all of this is paired with enough performance and more than solid runtimes for a price that is not that much higher than its direct predecessor. So I think the S16 is still a clear win and one of the best everyday 16-inch laptops you can currently buy. But let me know what you think, sound off below. As per usual, you can find more numbers and information in our written review. And if you felt informed and entertained, please leave your like and sub. And for everything else about tech and laptops, well, we have a ton of additional videos on the channel. Thanks a ton for watching, good people. My name is Alex, you have been absolutely awesome, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.